All right, it's 6:01. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, I got thumbs up from some people. There we go. Um, so anybody from the city want to kick us off, or you want me to just jump in?
I'm just here to listen along, so you can jump right in.
Okay, great. Well, we have lots of participants. That's good. And more joining all the time. So I'm going to do my best to try to make sure I add them as they come in. Um, Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn off the waiting room, and then that way people can just join. So, okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Brian Wright, and this is the neighborhood meeting for the Short Family Farm Project, now called Armistead. Going to run through a quick presentation. I think I'm slotted for 15 minutes, but hopefully I'll go faster than that. And then we can have some discussion after that, I hope. So I will share my screen and we will get the ship on the road. Okay, can you see my screen with the presentation, not just my email? All right, great. Okay, so here we go. Neighborhood meeting. For anybody who is curious, we this is kind of where we are in the process. Wanted to start with the nuts and bolts of kind of like what you're doing here tonight and where we are in the process. We had several things that we actually have done before we started with the city's official process. So this table here represents just the official process. We are here at the neighborhood meeting, but there are still multiple steps for us to go through as we continue on. There are also opportunities for additional public input, in particular at the Board of Mayor and Alderman first reading, I think. The date for that is TBD, to be announced. But as you follow along with us through this process, we'll make sure that everybody knows when that is, so you can come and participate and give input and hopefully share your thoughts and support. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is what has been referred to thus far as the Short Family Farm. And these are some of the Shorts over the years. They've owned the land for 135 years or so, and have farmed it ever since. And so they are part of the development team. They're going to stay involved as we go throughout. And Craig Hoover, who's on here as well, and I are their development partners. And I and my team, fortunately, also get to work on the master planning of the site. But as I mentioned, the team, part of my team, but there's a big team of experts. A project like this is really important. The city of Franklin is very on the ball with its requirements, making sure that we're doing all the things that we need to do from a development side, from planning, engineering, et cetera. So we have specialists for all of these things. And so hopefully you've had the opportunity to meet some of them as we've gone. So this is the site in 1997. You can see here in this old aerial photograph, there was no West Haven. This is Highway 96 here. So this is where West Haven would be in the future. Franklin Green was not present either. Carlisle as well, FCA. However, Gentry's Farm is here as a wonderful neighbor. And I'm sure if you've not been to the Short Farm, you've probably been to Gentry's. And it's about that time of year. I see the pumpkin patches just opened up. So the site is beautiful. Century Farm, historic buildings here. Wonderful old agricultural buildings. A beautiful stream runs through the site. Lots of pastures and lots of character. that we're looking to incorporate into what we're doing. For those who are new to the process, as I mentioned, we've done many things before we began the official city process. The most important of which was the Short Family Farm charrette. The charrette is a pretty intensive design session for multiple days. This was the schedule. We had a series of we had a hands-on workshop where all the participants, we probably had more than 100 people there, got to roll up their sleeves and be planners for the night with us, drawing and sketching, giving us their ideas. Then we had specific meetings with different topics. We covered infrastructure and transportation, agriculture, housing needs, et cetera. There were, I don't know, 6 or 7, 8 of those meetings throughout. We had an open design workshop set up that people could come participate in morning, noon, or night. These are some images from those technical meetings and from our design studio. And it was just really open and transparent. Before we actually put pen to paper, the first thing we did was get the community in and talk and sort of do the process a little bit different than things are normally done in the development world. So we are bound by a few different things. One is the conservation or the comprehensive plan of the city, which is called Envision Franklin. And in the comprehensive plan, there is a thing called the conservation subdivision. So this is our site here. And all of the areas in green are what are considered this conservation subdivision area. One of the important things to note about conservation subdivision is that it requires 50% of the land be put into conservation of some sort. You also have a lot of single family, residential, some various types of single family, clustering of lots and infrastructure. And then there's what's called special considerations, where they've specifically called out certain things that you can do in different parts of the property in the conservation subdivision design concept, they call it. And so we can do some duplexes and townhomes, like you might see over across in West Haven. The idea of an agri-hood, which I'll talk more about in a minute, is also part of that. In addition to the conservation subdivision guidance that's given in Envision Franklin, it also talks about the neighborhood mixed use area, which is this purple blob here. And within the neighborhood mixed use, it anticipates and talks about a diverse mix of high activity uses, connected and walkable block layout, having sort of a main street, and the historic part of the farm is right adjacent to it. And so it talks about a farm focused agricultural character as well. And so these are some of the high level guidance we get from Envision Franklin. There's also the Connect Franklin. It's the transportation master plan, if you will, for the city. And you can see down here, this is our site. There are some large yellow dash lines on it. And those are roads that the city is hoping to connect to help with some of the traffic and transportation issues in the area. And so we've been working with them to incorporate that into the plan as well. I mentioned a minute ago the idea of an agri-hood. So I'm going to give you a little bit of what an agri-hood is, because that's really what the focus of our project is. The agri-hood is really short for agricultural neighborhood. It's a planned community, and it's really farm focused, farm forward. And then the residential and mixed use areas of the development are integrated with working farms and community gardens and other types of agricultural amenities. Some places are using this term agri-hood as sort of a marketing and branding concept, and they'll have a little community garden over by the clubhouse or something and call it an agri-hood. But we actually are really focused on making the agricultural part of the development as important as the neighborhood and the development side of things. So we're looking to incorporate ideas to become a regional food hub, so that people can grow, process, and distribute, sell their produce from all around the region here, and become really interesting part of the community and the regional food system. An example, a little bit smaller scale on the agriculture, but a really nice development that you may have heard of. It's called Serenbe, right outside of Atlanta. Their farm is only about 10 acres. but it's great. It's well done. They use the food coming from the produce coming from the farm in the restaurants and things in the neighborhood. And they've done a great job of kind of continuing a rural aesthetic in the development. In addition to the agrihood concept, what we want to do is have design inspirations incorporating several different things. So looking at some of the environmental stewardship sides of things, tree preservation, of course, city does a great job of requiring that, but we want to see if we can really take that to the next level. Looking at incorporating wildlife-friendly design into in our planning, as I mentioned, farm living and the sustainable aspects of that. Dark skies so that we are able to still hopefully see the stars in the future and we're not contributing to light pollution, making our stormwater not only functional but also beautiful, and having incorporating sustainable stormwater features into the overall master plan. And then building with nature, really letting the land direct the direction that we're going and making sure that our buildings feel like they're just nestled right in. Unfortunately for us, we don't have very much forest like you see in this image. For us, we have more pasture and some tree rows, but we're going to try to add to our forest coverage. We're also looking to incorporate trails, gardens, natural playgrounds, and public art into it. Again, making sure that it's unique, that it's in keeping with the rural character and whimsy. Trying to find ways to incorporate community amenities, pavilions, structures, fire pits, for people to come and recreate. We also want to incorporate education as an important part of the project, be it agricultural education, sustainability education, classes, and having people that are making things within the neighborhood teach classes. A glass blowing example there in the image. I mentioned the food hub idea, finding ways to incorporate that so you can come and get fresh and local food, hyper local food even in our neighborhood as well. Incorporating everyday uses so that you can walk to things that are useful for you, getting your everyday needs met in the neighborhood. And the idea of incorporating entertainment and event gathering spaces. So, somebody might want to have a wedding or something in, this really cool place that we're creating, or having an outdoor picking area for people to come do a little outdoor concert in a little amphitheater or something like that. One of the things that we're trying to do as well is focus on, getting a wide variety of people living in the community, so that we have people at all stages of life, different interests, et cetera. And so we're looking at incorporating a multitude of different housing types to accomplish that goal, to try to incorporate some level of affordability, and which is really hard in this area, obviously, because the land prices are so valuable. But we know that if every house were a large single family house, then only a certain income level will be able to afford that. So we've been trying to find ways to have a wide variety of housing. So looking at single family houses, detached, and duplexes, little cottage courts, and tiny houses, row houses, multifamily, sort of small scale multifamily buildings like this 4-unit multifamily building. We can do up to 10-unit multifamily buildings in our town center. So looking what some larger multifamily might look like, and then some live work as well, where you might live above a shop. We did some drawing, some sketching during our charrette that I mentioned earlier. These are some of the ideas that have come out. We're trying to identify a unique architectural style as well as these different housing types. So you can see, some of our tiny house examples, and large houses, medium cottages, some of the live work. We have in the middle of the screen an inn that we've been looking at. Some duplexes, some townhouses, some of these multifamily 6-unit buildings, some big houses, they call them, then some mixed-use buildings where this might be on our main street area, people living above shops. And this is a little bit larger scale one as well, but always trying to make sure we're focused on the more agrarian, sort of rural aesthetic. So we're looking at these, sort of pitched roofs and shapes and massing inspired by barns and other buildings that will fit right in, and having, sort of rich materials that are, evocative of the place. So we're looking at, in this example, some stone and some siding here, some shake siding, as well as board and batten on some of the other buildings. So some of the goals from the family is to create a walkable, a complete community that's family friendly, featuring the history of the site, trying to preserve as many of the old farm buildings as we can and repurpose them, having actual working farms as part of the agriculture and the conservation areas, having mixed use and maybe a neighborhood farmers market, an education venue, as I mentioned, recreation and health benefits coming from all of these other things, and in a mix of housing types and prices. So this is the plan as it stands now. For those of you who have participated in the charrette process, you may recognize it. It's quite similar to what we presented then. We've made a few refinements to try to be more in keeping with the city's desires for the zoning and whatnot, and then a few refinements based on we got more accurate information about some of our where our stream goes, and so we have we were able to scooch some of the development out of the buffers and those sorts of things. But I'll just quickly walk you through. So here is Mac Hatcher coming through, and here's Highway 96. West Haven is just off the image here. This is FCA, the school, and then Gentry's Farm is over here. The new Hamilton Place subdivision has been approved and will be constructed in this quadrant that's missing from our, if you made us into a square. So looking from the north to the south, up here, we call this the North Village. It's created, comprised of a series of 4 different little hamlets. And each of those hamlets has their own center. So there's a civic space in the center of the hamlet. We're allowed to, per Envision Franklin, have a little bit of live work in this area on the north side, and some of these big house apartment multifamily buildings. So that's 4 units, no more than 4 units in a building. So these light purple are the big houses. We can also do some townhouses. So that's what these orange things are. And what we try to do is around each of these little neighborhood hamlet centers, the civic spaces have a little bit more density to help define that center. And so you kind of come in to a center and then go out. And as you go out, it gets less dense. And so you have some detached single family that are a little smaller, getting sort of medium size, and then larger as you move out. And then you drive through the agriculture into the next hamlet. And so very much a European pattern that you might see. And each of the hamlets is connected one to the next. And we also are required to and would want to connect to the Hamilton Place development. So their road comes in right about here. So we've attached to that. And then we're showing potential future connection. That's what's shown in the city's long-range transportation plan up to the north here. So that's a potential connection as well. Moving to the south, this is Old Charlotte right here that comes and has its sort of hairpin turn that you may be familiar with and comes back around. It used to continue all the way across until it was cut by Mac Hatcher. And so part of the Hamilton Place development actually proposed putting a cul-de-sac here and cutting it off. We learned that if we made this road meet city standards, we'd have to get rid of the beautiful hedgerows that are there. I'll show you more in a minute. We didn't want to do that. And so we're actually looking at this point right here, turning it into a multi-use trail that would work for biking, pedestrians, some of the farm equipment moving back and forth, and maybe even the neighbor who lives here. And so that's what that'll turn into. We've got these scenic buffer setbacks along Mac Hatcher and along 96. And so we're incorporating those into our agricultural uses. We have these little red buildings all around, or sort of pavilions. You've got parks and ponds and, some of our, community gardens we're showing here, but the rest is really more large scale agriculture. And up front here, we're looking at doing these incubator organic farms. So people who are getting into organic farming need a little bit more space, but not a whole, huge farm yet. So they'll have some neat stuff going on there. We have our neighborhood village center here. So this is the mixed use area that was talked about in Envision Franklin. So we're looking at having some of the mixed use in the darker buildings, some of the multifamily here, kind of making blocks. The parking is all contained within each block. We're actually looking at having a 1-level parking structure here and here possibly. And then we have the old historic Century Farm, all the buildings incorporated into what we're doing, little civic spaces between them, connecting into our Main Street area and our really cool pedestrian-only mixed-use zone. We're showing a hospitality district here for an inn, hotel, farm cottage, farmstay cottages as well. And then the light tan are just single family that are all laid out with interconnected streets, sidewalks, street trees, blocks, etc. And then we've featured all of the creek along here, as well as right now there's just sort of a thin crust of vegetation because it was farmed all the way up to the edge. And so we're actually looking to restore the habitat that once was there with forest restoration. So this is an image showing if you're coming from Machatcher, you see over here from Machatcher down Charlotte Pike. Here's where we transition to the multi-use trail, and then the road takes you in to the North Village and then into the town center area. You can see the hill behind West Haven peeking up over here. Here's the silo from our old farm. This is one of the existing livestock barns, and you can start to see how the houses are intended to nestle right up next to it. So if you're living here, you'd literally be just looking right over the pasture. And then we're even hopefully going to be able to, have trails and things that you can navigate through the pasture land as well. This is an aerial, a bird's eye view of the North Village, looking over here, sort of in this direction. You can start to see a clubhouse and pool, some of these live works, the idea of the big house 4-unit multifamily buildings, and then a whole mix of single family detached townhouses. Sorry. You can see, large neighborhood scale parks, the ponds, the hamlets connected, and then the agriculture coming right up to the edge as well. This is a view looking down the stream corridor. We were a bit aggressive when we drew this and didn't realize the buffer that we needed to maintain. So these houses actually will be scooched back a little further. There is also the possibility that they may end up having to have a road in front of them. This was just intended to be a trail with an alley behind, and so you would, just be this magical experience living right on this riparian zone. But we'll see if we were able to work that out through the process. This is a bird's eye view looking over. Here's Highway 96 going up. Front Street intersection is here. We have thought about the idea of a roundabout or a second light signal there. So this, important intersection becomes a little bit more civilized. And we haven't shown that in our submission just because it'll be a lengthy process in order to make that happen. So right now we have a right in and right out situation. But you can see again the old historic farm buildings incorporated, gardens, ponds, the streams. This is our sort of pedestrian priority street where pedestrians have the priority over cars, and then our pedestrian only mixed use area comes through here, taking you right up into the farm areas as well. This is a view looking down that pedestrian priority little street. It's called a Woonroof, planning nerd terms there. So cars can actually go down here, but they have to sort of carefully weave their way through. It sounds crazy. I know it works all over the place, especially in Europe, but they're doing it in the US now. And you can see here the farmers actually moving the sheep from one pasture to the next through the mixed-use town center. And this is just another view of what some of the lower scale mixed use might look like as well. So that's the project in a very fast nutshell. We have our newsletter that goes out, armisteadtn.com, not with an exclamation point. There's an Instagram set up. And then we also have started a podcast called Sow and Tell. And so there, instead of just doing email blasts, Craig and I get on and kind of give updates as we go. So we hope that you will come and join us for this journey as we go forward. So with that, I will stop sharing and stop talking. So any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Is that how we do this, Chelsea? Can we take questions? You're muted.
No, this is Craig Hooper. I just wanted to say, if anybody has any questions, if you feel free to, you can put them in the chat. Or here we go. Here's a question from Dave Stevens. What's the Instagram account again? It's Armistead TN, as in Armistead, Tennessee. That's the Instagram. Also the website. Sign up for the newsletter. Yeah, armisteadtn.com. So armisteadtn.com. Mm-hmm. Will the Short family run the farm, or is it someone else? So the thinking right now is there will be the homeowners association will govern the farm operation, and but it will in all likelihood be a third party that is contracted to run the farm, or at least to organize the farm. But like Brian said, the idea is that there would be sort of a mix of farm uses in here, where we have incubator farms that have their own little fiefdoms, as well as an organizing body that makes sure everything is producing the right amount for the right purposes in the right places.
There's a question about pets. If you have pets, will there be some type of yard available, or it'll have to be landscaped? So I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, one of the unique things we're going to be doing is using native plant material here, so that the idea of, again, working with the landscape and sort of reforesting or bringing back the landscape. We aren't looking to have a bunch of manicured lawns, except for in like parks and things. But each lot will have a courtyard area or some sort of a private space. But because we have a lot of open spaces, we're actually looking at do we have an opportunity to make some pet-friendly civic spaces within the neighborhood as well. We're a little bit worried though, because there's such a demand and so many people with pets all around, that we may be inundated with pet owners. But trails and things will be pet friendly as well. Time frame with when lots will be available to purchase. Craig, you want to take that?
Well, that's as Brian mentioned, we have to get through the city process, which I think in our best case scenario, we would get entitled in April, May of next year. And then of course there's the horizontal development work, which would probably take up to a year, a little, or up to 18 months. So I would think we'll start marketing the properties, I would think, in the latter part of next year. And then they'll be available to move in, I think, in 2025.
There's a question also about how many entrances will there be from 96 and Mac Hatcher. Mac Hatcher is limited access highway. So right now there is the one entrance that's on Old Charlotte. And that's a TDOT, Tennessee Department of Transportation road. And so they have the ultimate say as to what happens in that. On that road. We don't anticipate that we'll have any additional connections to it. It'd be great if we could, but that doesn't seem to be promising. We are exploring the idea of, in the future, possibly moving our connection from Old Charlotte up to our northern area there. There's some transportation benefits that could happen if we do that. But again, that's even something that we might not be able to do. And so we're glad we have one connection right now. And then on 96, we have we're showing right now the existing house on the property actually has two driveways there. And so we've consolidated them into one. And so we're showing one connection there. Then there's a connection at Front Street, lining up with West Haven. And then there's also the existing connection of what is, Old Charlotte, where that meets West Haven Boulevard. Yeah, so those are the connections there as well. And then we'll have some connections on the Old Charlotte side facing Gentry's farm as well. That road used to be called Short Lane, by the way. And so we might bring that back. People are asking about websites, single family lot sizes, home sizes. Yeah, there's a wide variety. I mean, what we know is that right now, while West Haven is, wildly successful and people love it, there's a pretty narrow range of sizes of housing within it. And so looking at, for us to try to find ways to expand that. So as I mentioned, tiny houses and small cottages are something that we're really interested in focusing on. I think tiny houses are an ill-defined term, but I mean, some people have tiny houses that are 300, 400, 500 square feet. But the idea is to make sure that architecturally they fit in well, with material wise as well as design. And then, even having some really large homes. So there's just a full gambit within a single family range. And then also, of course, as I mentioned, some of the multifamily options, the small 4, 6, and 10 unit multifamily buildings that we're allowed to do. And then row houses, and then, units above commercial in the mixed use areas. Let's see what else. Can we talk briefly about
what is this? The permitted districts, right? Yeah, have to go back and forth to the development plan for this one.
Let's see. Referred cross section. The permitted district relate to the thoroughfare types plan. Oh,
okay. You want to?
I don't have those pages. Yeah. That's a very specific question related to the actual submittal, which I so appreciate that you actually have looked at. That's awesome. So the districts that we're talking about, yes, I mean the road cross sections, for those who haven't studied the submittal and aren't into transportation related things, there is people think about, well, a road goes through and you make lots off of a road and houses face a road and that's that. But for us, because character is so important to us, we know that if we just had a one size fits all strategy for every road being exactly the same, you wouldn't get that unique character that we're trying to create. And so what we've done is, as a road moves from, an agricultural area into one of the hamlet's edges to the hamlet center and then back to agriculture, the cross section of the road actually changes so that in some cases you've got, like in our more dense or mixed use area, we would have more of a standard kind of more road with wide sidewalks with trees maybe in tree grates as opposed to in a planting strip. In some of our agricultural areas, though, what you would want is for the road to have not necessarily a standard concrete sidewalk. You might want it to have a gravel path that's related to the historic hedgerows that we're trying to maintain and those sorts of things. So we've been quite intentional about the way that these different districts are set up and the different thoroughfare types are set up as well. Let's see, are there going to be certain builders or can you only buy a lot? Craig, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we'll have, essentially a builder's guild, that will be sort of the pre-approved builders that understand the quality and materials that are going to be part of the covenants and restrictions about what you can build here. However, if you want to bring your own builder, there would just be a sort of an approval process to make sure they understand what that means. And of course, we'll in all likelihood be working with some builders for them to build some spec homes as well as buy some lots, and then you can buy from them as well, similar to how other sort of large scale developments are done. But what we don't expect is to have any sort of production housing. This would be we'll have the idea is to be as diverse as possible in size and materiality.
Yeah, and so right now what we've been thinking about is there are certain lots where maybe a road ends, kind of in the lot, and you can, so we have a really cool custom house there maybe, so that might be slated to be a custom lot. And then some of the other lots that are, in between or on a, less prominent location, we might make those available for a builder to build a, group of spec homes. And so, by them having several that they can build together, they are able to reduce the cost some, so we can start to, incorporate some more, reasonable price points, et cetera. But, again, we're so early in the process. These are all just sort of our aspirations for development strategy. But there seems to be a lot of a good sense in it, because what we want to do is have this place feel as organic as possible, that it grew over time. And we know by having as many hands in it as possible, be it builders, and also in addition to a builders guild, we'll have an architects guild. So architects will get approved to be working in the project, and they'll kind of be divvied up around the site as well. Because we really do, 100 years from now, we want it to just be like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Look at that village that was part of Franklin's history and growth. How many, let's see, so when you talk multifamily, are they condo or owned? I think some of both. The question is, if we have multifamily that I mentioned, will it be condo owned or rental? So we'll have some of both. I think, that'll give us, again, the widest variety of people living in the neighborhood, and allow for it to be the most diverse from a price point perspective. How many rental units will be offered? I don't know off the top of my head. In our submittal, we have there's like a table that talks about how many units of each type that we're getting approved for. But I don't know off the top of my head what that number is. Craig, do you happen to know?
Yeah, the town center has, we're asking for 300, about 300 multifamily units, apartments, and then another maybe 30 or 40 condos, but could be apartments, just sort of, you really just say multifamily, and whether you rent it or own it is sort of part of the development, market based. And then throughout the property are another about 100 potential multifamily units that would be either rental or condoed as well.
And the thing to note too is, knowing sort of people's feelings in Franklin, for at least for a while, and not as much now, but used to be, about multifamily, that it's not something that people were excited about or in favor of. Definitely understand that. We, as a consultant, I worked with the city on the zoning ordinance a couple of years ago, and trying to find ways to make sure that multifamily was, sort of in keeping with the character that people are looking for. One of the big objections we heard when we were doing our public process with the city on the zoning ordinance was from citizens, was that multifamily was always viewed as sort of a suburban apartment complex, and even something that wouldn't be a suburban apartment complex per se, in the way that was intended to be laid out. But a lot of times people will hear multifamily and think about projects like Iron Horse, even that's more small scale building, but is in its own way just sort of the single use kind of complex. What I always say is, if we design or build anything that's ever described as a complex, that we failed. So the city has all of its protections in place to make sure the buildings are small scale and feel more residential. And then for me, knowing that we're right at the corner of Matt Catcher and 96, it's on display. And so it puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that architecturally, things look great, and are, something that people are excited about and proud of. So all that to say, it's something we're very sensitive to. I don't know if your question was coming from a place of concern, but it's something that we're concerned about, just so you know. Let's see.
When do you anticipate starting to move dirt, infrastructure, et cetera? Well, hopefully as soon as possible after we achieve entitlement. So we have to get the city's approval to do what we want to do, then present a phase 1 development plan, and then start moving dirt within 60 to 90 days after that. So hopefully, if we're doing it right, then Q3 of next year.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're on top of things because we've gotten so much response. People have been so excited about the project. And I didn't say this earlier when I talked about the charrette process, but for those of you who weren't there, weren't able to participate in the closing presentation, we presented most of the stuff you saw tonight because again, it hasn't changed much. And we always do a Q&A like we're doing now. And, we're going through it. People, oh, this is great. We love it. We love it. And finally, at some point I had to say, does anybody have any objection or any negative thing to say? Please, we want to hear it. And literally there was not one. It's the first time in 18 years that I've been planning and doing these charrettes all over the country that this has ever happened. And so we want to build on that momentum and really create an example of how to do rural development in a thoughtful, in a sensitive way that respects, the heritage of the city and the heritage of the land, et cetera. So we want to get going as quick as we can. Will cottages be on the ends of a row like River Rest, River Plantation? Will it be cottage court? Yeah. So we have some cottage courts incorporated in the plan because I was trying to stay within my allotted time frame. I didn't get into all the details, but you'll see there are cottage courts within there. And those will be really cool. For those who don't know, cottage court is basically like a series of cottages that face onto a little green space without necessarily a road in between them and the green space. And the city allows us to do a certain number of those. We can only have 5% of them, 5% of the lots not facing onto a road. And we're working on that. The city currently doesn't allow us to do anything besides that. And so we've got our 5% for sure. But we know that in a context like this, a project like this, it's so unique that it might be, advisable from a character perspective to have some different standards in that regard. So we're working with the city to see if we can up that number to get some more cool things like that. Mm-hmm. Total number of acres is roughly 200 acres. Mm-hmm. I should have said that at the beginning. Thank you for asking. Oh, there you go. Craig said 191.6.
Isn't that right? I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah.
I'll double check that, but yeah.
The number, this says, when will you publish the number of each type of unit? That's currently in our submission that we submitted to the city last Friday, I think. So it's already out there, public record.
And it's on our website. The number, obviously, we're still going through the process. So that number is obviously could be in flux a little bit, depending on the traffic study and, and what we're able to do as, once we go through engineering's comments and stuff. So give us there's a little volatility in that number, but on the website, you'll see a pretty good breakdown.
And the good news is too, again, for anyone who's concerned about multifamily, for example, the city has in place so many different parameters that would, like, I could imagine someone saying, at least in another community on another project, maybe, but maybe someone will say it to me one day. Well, how do we know you're not just going to make this all multifamily? And so one is, Craig and I, as developers, don't want to, and the family doesn't want to either. And so that's check one. Check two is that the city's zoning requirements wouldn't allow us to do so. And then three, even if the zoning allowed it to have more multifamily even than it is allowed to, the traffic impact studies, parking, other metrics and standards like that would curtail that from happening. So we have to make sure that everything we do, we're having to do, for quite detailed studies to make sure that it all works as well. So stormwater, et cetera. Let's see, will there be accommodations for guests and owners to stay during a visit? Yes. So first and foremost, we would hope that people would stay at the inn or the farmstay cottages. But we also want to have, accessory dwelling units. So basically, a little apartment above the garages so that, if you have an easy place for somebody to stay, or like I do, I live in West Haven right now. And we have one of my employees actually lives over my garage in the apartment there. And it's she could she walks to work because our office is also in West Haven. She could never afford to otherwise if we didn't have that small scale rental option available. And then also it's great for me because it helps bring down our mortgage costs. So we hope to have as much of that as possible. And some people have them and don't rent them out. And so you would then, they'd be available for people to stay in or guests to stay in as well. Let's see.
When you publish the number, we already said that one.
Yeah. How does housing density compare to West Haven? Let's see.
It's hard to say. I would say that, I think really it's the where there is development, it's probably similar or perhaps even a little bit denser, but there's just so much places where there's not development, there's so much more open space. So I think overall it's probably going to be pretty similar when we land on the total number of units allowed. So
yeah, and West Haven's interesting. It's a little deceiving if you don't realize it, but the entire property for West Haven is about 1,500 acres or so, I think. And only about half of it is actually in development. So all that hill that rises up behind West Haven is all part of, conservation that was in the property. And so one of the reasons why it's a little deceiving that there is so much conservation from West Haven is that it's all sort of in one area, kind of tucked away in the back. But, for us, it's going to be really much more obvious, because it's interwoven all throughout. So on the whole, again, I don't remember what the density number is for West Haven, or I don't even remember what our density number is, but however they compare, even if they're identical, we're still going to feel much looser, much less dense because of the way we've incorporated and infused the open space and the agriculture and all of that. Because most of the lots, we either are facing a park or a green space or agriculture. There are very few lots that don't actually face onto that, which is one of the really cool attributes of the site. Let's see, will there be street parking allowed? So there will be on-street parking in some locations. In others where, it's intended to be more rural, you wouldn't have the on-street parking there. We have the predominance of houses will have rear lanes in the back. And so wanting just to make sure that the whole streetscape experience is much less about driveways coming in and out all over the place. I think there may be a few lots where there wasn't room for an alley or rear lane to go. And so we've had them be front loaded. But in that case, the garage will be tucked around behind, like you see in the historic parts of downtown Franklin, where they have a driveway still. Standalone houses, will all the single houses be, whether they be normal size house or tiny house, have a garage parking? Yeah, that's actually a great question. It's interesting. A lot of the more walkable mixed use newer neighborhoods around the country don't have every lot with a garage like we do here. And I can't remember if that's a city requirement or not. But for us, a lot of people could care less. I mean, I don't park in my garage. And I love parking on the street in front of my house. And so, if I were looking to build in the neighborhood and I weren't interested in having an apartment above a garage or something, and someone said, well, would you like option A, which is the house, option B, which is a house plus a little, parking gazebo or something, or option C, a garage, or option D, garage with an apartment above? And then I could pick, and according to what I wanted to spend as well. And so we're exploring that. Why is it these other places have not been so rigorous in including and requiring garages? And how is it that places that are even more expensive than some places in Franklin, people are willing to accept it? You might think, well, it's an expensive house, so of course somebody's going to want a garage, but some people would actually rather have a rear yard instead of just a courtyard. So we're not sure is the answer to that question yet, unless the city tells us we have to have garages. Let's see, how many total residential units and how total people do we expect? Craig, total units?
So we have applied for 804 dwellings.
804.
804 dwellings.
Not 5.
Right, that's right, not 5. Again, that number will, in all likelihood, change based on the city process. But that's what we've asked for. And and in terms of total people, I mean that depends on average family size, something like that. If it's and apartments obviously have fewer residents than single family homes, so it's maybe, I don't know, there's probably a calculation in there, somewhere in the 1,500 range, something like that, maybe.
I actually saw one of those tiny house shows one time where it was a story of a family of six who are embarking on their journey to build a tiny house and all live in it. And they were really concerned about the outdoor space, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I bet
So even a tiny house, you never know.
Mhm.
Will rentals be less than 6 months? No, definitely not. That would work in against us having an inn for sure. And overall character, kind of what we're trying to do.
And affordability. I mean, we once. I mean, look, I come from Seaside, Florida, and and if, obviously their entire economy is built on that thing being short-term rentals, and we're trying to actually build a neighborhood, a community where people live, and this is and all of a sudden we hope we're building a place that's so desirable that it would be that people could take their accessory dwelling units or their places and rent them out on VRBO, and then all of a sudden it becomes a tourism site, and that's not what the family is interested in, or us as developers. So
And
no.
just to clarify, Craig, when you said we hope that we create a place so desirable, what you meant was we hope we create a place that's desirable enough for somebody to actually be willing to or want to do that. However,
That's right.
that's too bad because we're not going to allow them to.
Not gonna allow it.
So let's see, here's a long one. Development is very integrated with different aspects. How do you maintain this long term compared to typical developments? It seems there will be a lot more responsibility for the homeowners association and required management, i.e. civic areas, farm communities, farm, etc. Have you seen good examples of how these standards and character are maintained long term? How will retail and hospitality areas work long term? All are, let's see, are those sold off? Sorry, I just forgot how to read all of a sudden. Are they sold off and managed on own, or is there some accountability? Yeah, so all of those things are things that we have been concerned about from the very beginning. And by concerned, I mean, we've been concerning ourselves with them, not we're concerned that we don't know, won't be able to manage it. We have been looking at best practices from other places around the country as well, especially those with agriculture incorporated. We Craig actually his background around here was he was headed up the development team at South Hall, and so the agriculture side of things is something that he understands well. But for us, it's the long-term viability of the project is crucially important because we all, us and the family, intend to stay involved throughout. Own some buildings and other things. So it's in our best interest for the quality, the character, the value, all that stuff to be maintained long term. And the HOA will have standards in it, just like West Haven would. There will be additional things that you would have to cover, obviously, as you pointed out rightly so, with the agricultural areas, the hospitality as well. But there isn't a scenario in which any of these things can sort of slip through the cracks. It will all be deeded, have covenants and restrictions that actually go beyond the city's requirements for, even though they are quite rigorous requirements, we will exceed what the city requires too.
Mhm.
That wasn't as loud as it sounded.
The question of, will it be sold off? I mean, yes, technically, we're developing the land, we'll be selling off parcels, but we're going to be highly prescriptive about the type of people or the type of uses that can be in the town center, our commercial properties. We're also going to be highly restrictive about about what can't happen, and the building materials and the uses. So yes, we will be very involved in the long term. But yes, technically, it will transfer from one entity to another.
And one of the things to keep in mind too, as we move forward, because of the, as you point out, sort of very integrated aspects of this, and the vision, and at the end of the day, kind of what this place is all about will be infused in everything we're doing. And so when a business is interested in coming in, we'll actually have to vet it to see, like, is this business in keeping with the vision, mission, and values of the project and of the community and what we're looking to do. So for instance, if we're this regional food hub that's all about fresh food, and you go pick your vegetables while you're waiting for your table at the restaurant, and then they're going to cook those vegetables as part of your meal, it would be off message for us, and not in our best interest to allow a shop that focuses on sandwiches in plastic wrapper like at the airport. And so those kind of things will have to be thought through in a great deal of detail. But that's part of the reason why this project is so fun and so exciting for us and for the family. Why the family can get so passionate about it and wants to stay involved, because it's not just going to be another development. I didn't say this at the beginning, and I usually do. But what we're trying to do is really create a national model for how to do rural development. And Franklin has done a good job of having noteworthy places. People come to study West Haven and look at it from a planning and zoning perspective. And then but the way we're incorporating all the sustainable stormwater features, the regional food hub, the agri-hood, all of those things people will come to seminars to learn about what we've done here. And so we have to keep this going long term. Next question is, will there be people be able to drive golf carts in the community from West Haven? Well, that's something that we are also interested in, not specifically golf carts, but just having connectivity. We've, as I said, aligned our entrances with them and those sorts of things. But knowing that what we can submit right now, you can't actually drive straight over from West Haven unless you go at the light of Old Charlotte and West Haven Boulevard. So, there's been exploration in the past about like an underpass, like a tunnel. We've heard stories that there's an old cattle tunnel that used to be able to, because the Shorts had their farm was quite extensive, and so we've heard that you could go through. So we're still looking for that tunnel. But anyway, we hope it's important to us to have it be as connected as possible to West Haven, because there are, West Haven's town center is great, but the things you can do there are somewhat limited. And until we just, got the park on the pond there, there wasn't really a place where families could like just sort of hang out and like let the kids run around. And even still, unless you're eating pizza, you kind of can't do that. And so we want to have a place that's really family friendly, who has more families than West Haven right now. And so we want to, really create a symbiotic relationship with what's going on here and what's going on over there. All right. Well, I think we caught up. Oh, here goes another one. So Kathy says, oh, I like this one. Terrific job on creating such a unique and well thought out vision and working to bring it to life. So thank you for that. That is very helpful for us, because this is not an easy process. I tell you what, the easy thing to do is just to sort of follow the rules, follow the regulations, do a conventional subdivision. And we could have just left met our 50% requirements, sort of tuck it over in one corner and all that stuff. And instead, we and the family set out to do this thing that is unique. And so we appreciate those kind of comments, as well as the, specific input and questions. We hope that you will all continue to come and participate. We know a lot of people on here tonight are just people who have been following the project and are excited to hear what's happening next. And hopefully there's going to be some little tidbit of new information that's come out. But we're still continuing to move along. We will need your support through the process when there are opportunities for the public to give input with BOMA or Planning Commission or whomever. We really need to, they need to hear that this is actually a project that people love. So often people are happy to come and protest and be against the project, but it's really rare for people to go in support of a project. And so you assume, well, if I like it, everyone does, of course. And again, because we're asking for some weird things to enhance and feature this rural charm and character, they need to know that, you all support those kinds of things as well, as we work through with the different departments on that too. So thank you for that positive feedback. Chelsea, anything else we need to do? Any other steps?
I don't think so. I think that checks all the boxes.
Okay, well, good. Well, hopefully we checked more than all the boxes. We went above and beyond. That's our mantra, above and beyond. So as Craig said, if you've got any further questions or you wake up in the middle of the night with some cool, amazing thought or idea for us, we're still, flexible enough where we can, still take ideas. And certainly if you have concerns or specific questions, as hopefully you see here, we're happy to answer them. I know that may be unusual when you're talking to development team to have people happy to answer questions, but that's the way we're going about this from the beginning. So
please, go onto the website, Armistead TN. We have a newsletter. I promise we won't spam you. It's maybe every couple of weeks or 3 weeks we'll send out something, and that's really it. But we want you to stay involved, and we want you to we hope you support us as we do something really special here.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I know there's many of the family members on as well. And so on behalf of them, I'll say thanks to you all for participating and taking an interest too. This is a special time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.